All right, guys, it's Thursday, August 15th, 2024, and you're watching the MMA Eco Live podcast with me, your host, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem. And guys, we got a big episode today. So excited to have you. I'll go over some personal news here in a second, and then after that, briefly touch on UFC 305, anything else we can think of, and then go into your questions. So you can drop those throughout the show. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Like this video. Really appreciate it when you do. But okay, this is burning on my chest, and I got to get it on the table. So I, in my MMA career, have obviously remotely covered a lot of different kinds of events. I have done some on-site coverage for a couple different publications. I would say no real big publications, but I've been to Bellator events. I've been to Invicta FC events. I covered the local Kansas City MMA scene when I was living out there. And there's not, past that, there's not always a lot bigger that you can do, but I've been hoping to get back into some live event coverage to just get a lot more face-to-face time with people. So the headline here is that I will be working as media at Road to UFC next Friday. A week from tomorrow, I will be in Las Vegas. I will be cage side. I will be at the UFC Apex, which is insane. Right. Golly, I'm still like getting over this. It was late Tuesday night when I found out the news. Let me back up a little bit before that. For the UFC to have an event at the Shanghai PI, at the even in Hangzhou, China, there would be I felt like there would be a much greater chance of me getting approved to work as media. I wasn't able to make it out to the opening round of Road to UFC. The Hangzhou event got moved. That was supposed to take place in August. That's no more. Although we do have an event now in Macau that just got announced yesterday, which is great. But yeah, I've applied for UFC media credentials a couple times, and not because I felt super confident that I could get them. I think the first time I did it, I was just like, I guess I'll just try. I didn't really have like a strong plan, but I was just like, I might as well try and just see what happens, and fully expecting them to be rejected. And they were. The second time I applied for credentials, actually either the second or third time. The last time I tried to apply for credentials was this last spring. That would have been February or January. Yeah, January. The Road UFC finals were coming up on, I think, February 4th or February 3rd at the Apex. I was told to try applying. And someone from the Shanghai PI asked me, "Hey, are you coming out?" I was like, well, I don't know if they'll let me in because I don't have media credentials. And this contact was like, okay, let me see what I can do. And they told me to apply. They thought that I was supposed to get approved, but I was actually rejected. And so that didn't come through. So the Road to UFC semis are coming up in August. And I was trying to put myself in the best possible place. The website was no longer a brand new website. I definitely understood why you wouldn't approve someone with a website that was just 2 weeks old, like it was back in January. I definitely understood all of these things. Understand everybody wants UFC media credentials. Fans want those sometimes for their Instagram page. And you really only get them if you're a part of a really established publication. Or you have Dana White or just you have a lot of people, you're best friends with someone in PR. We've seen a couple outlets that maybe shouldn't be approved that are at UFC press conferences, things like that, which I don't know what it's like if getting into a press conference is quite the same thing as having kind of the blanket UFC credentials approved. But yeah, I was told like, yeah, try applying again. Or I was trying to set myself up to be in a good spot, thinking about my content. I was cleaning things up, trying to get my website looking better, and wanting whoever would look at my application to see really good things if they saw that. So once I felt like things were in order, then I sent an email back out to PR, and I didn't hear anything back for a while. And I had told a couple people that I know within the organization, like, hey, I just did this. I didn't tell them to do anything, but just told them, hey, I'm going to try and do this. And then they said, okay, let me see what I can do. A couple people were behind the scenes with that. So then it was last week, I got an email back from PR that was like, hey, we're not sure what our media setup is just yet, but I'll let you know soon. So that was like a big deal, because I was just like, that was not a no. I was expecting just to get another flat out no, because I'm not part of a big publication. I've only been around for 3 years. I'm a one-man army, and I'm not getting millions of views, millions of clicks. Like I'm just not a big shot in the industry, just to be honest. No matter how good I feel the quality of my content is, it's just like, you can very well see the facts. And so I was not expecting to get credentials. I was expecting next week's Las Vegas trip just to be a networking trip. And then maybe there would be a tiny chance that someone would let me in at the last second just to like watch the fights. So I was being realistic. And even with that though, I started to kind of have a plan of like, okay, in the crazy event I get approved, I'm not going to have a whole lot of time to plan out my content. So here's kind of like a rough idea of what the content would be. So, but yeah, and then I was told to check it. So I was waiting around. I was waiting. I was like, okay, this is next week. And then on Tuesday evening, I got the email that my account had been approved, and I logged in and I could see all the places where you can just click like request credentials for all the UFC events. So like, as far as I can tell, like I can go to UFC events and cover them as media, which is just insane. Just sitting here in my bedroom and have my cheap ring light set up, my cheap camera, and just doing the best that I can here. But I know, and I think the UFC knows, I know there's a couple people that work behind the scenes to get this across the line, but I know that I have been one of the main, if not the top person covering Road to UFC outside the UFC. I've given it so much coverage, hyped it up a lot, made analysis and features and all these different things, broken a lot of the news. And I know that like, if I'm the kind of person that's like, if I'm going to do something, I'm only going to do it if I feel like it can be at a really high quality, at least what is like the best possible of my ability. So I don't feel like they'll regret it. I'm going to make sure nobody regrets it. And in fact, everyone is excited to have me there, feels affirmed in bringing in a small guy who is unproven in a lot of ways in there. I'm not going to make an ass of myself. I'm not going to take pictures putting up the fist with fighters while I'm like on the job. I'm not going to, all the stupid stuff that people talk about with media. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be professional. And so what can you expect from next week? Well, I'm super excited. I'm really excited. Thinking through next week's content schedule, I've just been like, how can I have the most fun? And how can I create content that is professional and really of high quality, but also just like brings some life to things? So like, will there be just the typical interviews of like post-fight interviews or press conference? Yeah, I'm going to do that kind of stuff. And because like, that's something I really want to do. And I want to have experience doing that. I've massively upgraded my gear, and I'm going to have a lot of, even between now and next week, like upgrading my gear a lot and testing it to make sure it all looks good and that I can set it up and tear it down quickly, all that stuff. And I'm gonna do like a travel vlog kind of thing as I'm going down to Las Vegas. So believe it or not, your boy is gonna drive down from Portland, Oregon, down to Las Vegas. It's a 16-hour drive, 15 and a half. Gonna do it over 2 days. I've got a lot of crap to carry down with me, and I really wanted to have my car, while I was down there. And so I just figured rather than fly and rent a car or take, an Uber, I just wanted to drive. I've been wanting a road trip for a while. I like the space by myself in the car. I'm going to stop by Crater Lake National Park on the way down, which is my state of Oregon's national park. I'm going to stop by there, do a hike, hit the road again, and then the next stay the night in Reno. The next day, I'm going to drive down to Vegas. I'll get to explore the strip a little bit, but yeah, I've been all summer really, like I've even done some practice making travel vlogs, all that kind of stuff. You could see it almost as like a little bit of an embedded for Road to UFC. I'm not going to be like right along. It's not going to focus so much from the athletes. It'll be from my point of view. Maybe you'll see some familiar faces pop up that aren't just like fighters that are fighting this week. But and then most likely to, and keep in mind, like all of this is with a grain of salt. I haven't gotten like the media schedule for the week. This is my first time doing this with UFC. I've done this with Bellator and with Invicta before. So I'm on like all the like media emails and stuff like that. But for UFC, this is my first time. And so all of this is with a grain of salt. Things could change, but the plan is to do the travel vlog, to do the interviews, hopefully get some, I really want to take some cool like portrait shots of some fighters and hopefully produce some cool photography. I'm also hoping to live stream the weigh-ins that would be Thursday morning. So sometimes those weigh-ins are hard to find. Historically, they've been hard to find. Being in Vegas, hopefully it's a little bit easier. But yeah, I'm hoping to live stream. I keep getting closer and closer to the camera because I'm excited. I'm hoping to live stream those weigh-ins and maybe even do a little bit of commentary along the way. That would be really fun. I love that kind of stuff. I love it when other media outlets do the kind of hushed commentary. And so that sounds like a lot of fun to me. So I really want to do that. And other than that, just enjoy the ride. Hopefully just get to connect with a lot of people, get lunch with a couple people, just get a lot of face-to-face interactions and just have the time of my life. That is what that's like, if I am not having a good time and if I'm not like producing things that like, first of all, like the UFC is like, okay, you know what you're doing as a media member, because I don't want to get kicked out and I don't want to never be invited back. So I know that's mostly just like an element of professionalism and trust. Not even really talking about like the opinions or things like that. That's a whole different thing. But just like for the PR team, I want them to be like, okay, we made a good choice here. This is someone that we'd like to have back. So there you have it. I'll be in Las Vegas all week, hoping to do a podcast at the same time next week. I don't know where I'll be. Maybe just in the hotel room, maybe by the pool. We'll see, but we'll have some kind of podcast next week, unless something comes up that I like absolutely have to cancel. The hope is to have a podcast next week from Las Vegas. I'm staying just off the strip, so I'll be right in the middle of it. This may probably be the only time that I ever want to stay on the strip. I don't often hear a lot of like media members coming back like, man, the funnest thing about that trip was staying on the strip in the heat and just being around all those casinos. I just love that. I don't often hear that, but I feel like as a media member, it's a little bit of a rite of passage. So I'm going to do it and I'm going to try to have a good time with it. So there you go. Next week, lots of fun stuff with Road to UFC. Tons of coverage coming your way, new things, exciting things. And then who knows what the future will hold now that we've got the big stuff on our side. We've got the UFC giving me the stamp of approval. So if you're watching this, anyone who helps make that possible, I know who you are. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You will not be disappointed. All right. Let's go through your questions. Oh, you guys seem pumped. You guys have a lot of energy this week. Oh, Rio, I missed your first question. The first question I have is that one on the screen right now. Let me see if I can piece together what you're talking about. He actually thinks the networks competing for rights to the deal is competition, but it would create less competition in a sense because now multiple networks would have the opportunity to host fight cards, not just one. Why is the US? I think I know what you're talking about. Okay, I understand. Or I think I know like what you're talking about. There was a guy on Twitter that said something like, it would be great if the UFC's broadcast deal was split up into a lot of different networks. And, I think there's a couple things that guy, I'm not going to say who it is because I know who it is. And he's not a bad guy. He has a big passion for the sport. He's literally committed no sin. And so I was honestly a little bit frustrated when I saw some people pulling him out and just destroying him on Twitter. And it honestly kind of felt like bullying to me. And I was upset by that because people can say whatever they want on Twitter. If you're a jerk, that's one thing. If you're really, I don't know. He had an idea exactly what you're talking about, the UFC. He thought that it would be better for competition and kind of how certain boxers will have deals with certain networks to broadcast their fights. He thought that the UFC, they could have a deal with Fox and Sean O'Malley could only fight on Fox, whereas other fighters could fight on other broadcast networks. And while I disagreed with him, I really didn't understand the intense blowback and people posting his tweets and just destroying the guy. Because guys, this is bullying. This is why fans want to quit MMA, because they feel like they can't post an opinion without getting absolutely torched for it. And even if you don't agree with it, it's not like no one's being harmed, no one's being attacked, whatever. But as for the actual idea, I don't know. You're asking this guy thinks that networks competing for rights to the deal is competition, but it would create less competition in a sense because now multiple networks would have the opportunity to host fight cards, not just one. Well, yeah, I can see this from a couple different angles. In the one sense, it's like the UFC's. I've never been a big fan of, and I know other pro sports do it. I've never been a fan of splitting up broadcast deals among a lot of different networks. That to me is really frustrating. And the idea is that they'll get a lot more money out of it overall by having multiple deals and making fans pay a lot for different networks. But in the post TV world, just it's so convenient to have everything on ESPN Plus. That's where as a fight fan for UFC, that's where everything is. And so that I really don't like that idea as a fan. It's not a fan friendly way of things. For the UFC, they think that they can expand their overall reach. Maybe they can, but you may also see like if the UFC were to ever be like, hey, we're going to have like 10 fight cards a year on Fox Sports, we're going to have 10 fight cards a year on Netflix. Like, I don't feel like, I don't know. That to me feels like very flimsy. And also, like, if you're building a whole broadcast deal around like a couple fighters, like Sean O'Malley, he's always going to be. What happens when Sean O'Malley loses a fight and then goes on a losing streak? Suddenly that deal is worth a lot less. If his star is not growing, it's only shrinking. Pull this back a little bit. Okay. There we go. Refocusing. Yeah, there's a lot of problems with it. There's a lot of problems with that idea. And I do also agree that like it would actually create less competition, because networks can be like, I feel like when there's just one big deal, that's going to drive up I agree with you, is what you're saying. So yeah, I definitely share your sentiment. I was just frustrated on how that particular person was treated. Hey, congrats for getting a gig. Happy that you did this the right way and not the unprofessional way. No clout chasing. No, I mean, like, do I hope that my channels grow from this? Absolutely. I want, it's my hope is that you're all, as a content creator, as a media member, you're trying to find the intersection between what would my audience really, really enjoy, and also what makes me the most happy, or like, what am I really in this sport to do? So I want to have a lot of fun doing this, and I'm thinking through like, how can I help things grow? So if that's chasing clout, I think we're probably all guilty of that. But like, I never asked any of these people to go to bat for me. I never begged anybody for credentials. I felt like, personally, like, while I could add value, like for them to just like give out credentials to a small website that's kind of unproven on a bigger stage, that could be a big liability for them. If they're they don't want to let in just everybody. So I really understand why they wouldn't give me credentials, and maybe I'm selling myself short, but like, I definitely don't feel like credentials are owed to me, and I did not beg anybody. I've always just said, like, if I put my head down, if I just work my ass off, if I be as professional as I can be and create content that people really, really like, then a lot of the other stuff will take care of itself. Do you need to know about algorithms? Do you need to know about SEO and growth? All that stuff? Absolutely. But the most important part is that your audience loves what you do, you love what you do, and you're creating high quality content. So if you, and this is just like the ultimate lesson for content creators, media members, journalists, whatever. Find the niche. Do you think I would have been able to get any, like, I would have, as distant as I thought getting credentials would be, getting those would be so much even more out of reach if I was just like, if all I was doing was just like reposting fight news, the same that everyone else is doing. Even if I was a really good graphic designer, there's nothing new that's brought to the table with that. So find the niche, explore the niche, perfect the niche, all of those things. My biggest advice to everybody, the UFC wants to pump. I mean, we've talked about this, but like, the UFC has to love it when people pump up Road to UFC, especially an English speaking audience, when they're pressing people, hey, get up at 3 a.m. It's going to be worth it. Sacrifice your Friday night. It's going to be worth it. Check out these fighters. All of that, UFC has to love that. So I feel like that was one of the biggest factors of me getting credentials, is just literally Yeah, standing alone in the field, or there are other people that are doing an incredible job covering Road to UFC as well. Like my friend Overhand Indonesia creates really good content. He's spelling his handle. Let me look it up for you real quick. He is like an incredible resource for Indonesian MMA. OVR, so like overhand without any with no vowels _ID. Follow him on Instagram and on Twitter. He's a really good source for Indonesian MMA. I was pressing him like, dude, the UFC goes to Jakarta, Indonesia. You gotta apply like for credentials because you provide such good content and coverage of Indonesian MMA. So there's a lot of. I'm not the only one doing this, but yeah, find the niche. Congrats. When will you be able to do one-on-one interviews with fighters? I would expect so. Like, I don't know what I'm kind of like. I don't know. There's the whole like fighter hotel thing. I'm not gonna like press too hard on that. I'm gonna because the other thing is that I don't want to create too much work for me to do. My ambition can definitely swallow me whole, and so I think my goal is to just like focus on a couple things, do them really well, have space. But yeah, I definitely want to do one-on-one interviews with fighters. I've already reached out to like most of the Road to UFC fighters, some other people, managers, and just been like, hey, see you next week. I'll be looking for you. So, yep. Can I ask Dana about the Migu deal? Ooh, that's a great question. If I meet him, I will probably not have much time with him. If he's even there, I'm hoping that Dana would be at the Road to UFC fights, but if he is there, if I get any time, I will definitely ask that. And hey, if you guys like, if there are things, I'll say this, if there are things that you all really, really want out of Road to UFC coverage, if all of you all were like, hey, can you please get an interview with this person? Like, I will try my best. I will not. I'm not saying I'll do whatever you all want, but if y'all have ideas of things that you really really want, even if it's a little bit off the grid, let me know. And if it works out with things, then I will do my best, because ultimately, like, you all are the ones that keep everything running. So let me know if there's any kind of coverage that you really really want. The Kaikar France of Just Shut Up and Dance with Me. Nice one. Do you know that song, Walk the Moon, Shut Up and Dance with Me? Yeah, I do. I couldn't tell you who sings it. I know only that one line. And I know that whenever it plays at like a wedding that I go to, it's the line that all the girls just like scream. And I'm like, oh my, like, it's a classic wedding song for sure. On Protect Your Neck, our chat calls Dracus Third Reichus Duplessis for his thoughts on colonialism. I did a lot of research especially with the Kareem Zidane article, but I think Duplessis's claim that the real African champ is rooted in colonial logic, and why this perspective needs to be challenged. It privileges those who have benefited from colonial structures like Duplessis, who is of European descent and was able to remain on the continent due to the violent displacement of indigenous populations by European settlers. During the era of colonialism, concepts like race and nationality were not just descriptors, they were strategic tools used by colonizers to justify and perpetuate their dominance. Agree. Well, I don't. You have done so much more research than I have on that. I feel like I probably agree with your sentiment on that, and there's there always has to be, if you're like someone in Duplessis. The way I feel is that if you're in Duplessis' position, you're South African. You didn't have a choice where you were born. Your passport is South African. By all accounts, you are South African. That doesn't mean that you can't still acknowledge that you are the benefactor of a lot of unjust historical events, and that you're in the position that you're at because of your skin color, and you do have a certain degree of privilege. I think that you can both relish your South African and even African identity while still acknowledging the unjust things that have happened in the past. So that's how I feel about it. I don't have a lot of like strong opinions about this, and I really appreciate all the research that you did on it. Reading articles, I just haven't really like paid a whole lot of attention to that. Even like a lot of these like identity things can get really weird to me, and so I haven't always dipped my toes in that, but appreciate your thoughts. And hey, here's an idea. Road to UFC guys, just glorified cans. I understand why people might think that. And there are times when there are fighters that appear on Road to UFC who may be one of the more well-known fighters from such and such country, and they probably shouldn't be there. I understand why people think that. However, there are a couple fighters that you have to, that are UFC fighters now from Road to UFC, that when you look at them, you got to think this could be a future champion. Talking about Rei Tsuruya, talking about Rinya Nakamura, for crying out loud. He is an incredible fighter. Even Lee Jung-young from South Korea, a really exceptional talent. I know he lost his last fight, but he has incredible potential as well. I mean, it's in a way, it's not a whole lot different from Contender Series, right? There's lots of fighters that come on Contender Series that might be a little bit underqualified. They somehow manage their way into a UFC contract, and they really don't perform well in the UFC. So you could say the same thing about that as well. Fighters from the US, Canada, England, like there's fighters that find their way into those opportunities as well. Sometimes it's just because who their management is, who they know, that they get the Contender Series shot. So this isn't really just a Road to UFC thing. And that's another reason why the Road to UFC has 3 rounds, right? It's not just about having a good night, but it's about having 3 good nights. They really want to have a wide pool and quickly weed out the fighters that shouldn't be there and keep the best of the best fighters, which is, I feel like, really what they've done with a lot of the previous winners. So I think so far the system has really worked, and even for the fighters that I feel like you're probably referring to that did not have a good performance, probably shouldn't have been there. If anything, even those, that's still really valuable, because someday fighters from those countries are going to be winning UFC contracts, and they will have win streaks in the UFC. They will be the next fighter to establish a market in their country, establish a fan base. And we'll look back and at these first couple seasons of Road to UFC and be like, yeah, we kind of found out where this certain country is at, whether it be Indonesia or India, wherever it is. That was just a time for us to see how this talent stacks up and where they're at in their development. You notice that there weren't any Indonesian fighters in Road to UFC this year. And I think that was a great idea. I think we saw like, okay, this is where generally Indonesian talent is at. And for the most part, it's not ready for the UFC level. So they didn't even recruit anybody this year. I think that was really smart. Yeah. And even like I posted an image of the fight card from UFC Macau, the last Macau show that was in August of 2014. You look at that card, there's a lot of Chinese fighters on the card, and none of those fighters amounted to anything. They would be the fighters in Road to UFC today that would lose in the first round. This was just 10 years ago. And you look at the growth and development. 10 years is a long time, but it's also not a super long time. Now we've got over a dozen Chinese fighters in the UFC. we've got a Chinese champion, we've got Song Yadong, we've got Yan Xiaonan, we've got Li Jingliang, a lot of fighters. Sumu Darji is also ranked, or at least was ranked for a while. But it just keeps getting better and better. Road to UFC now is at least half, if not more, Chinese fighters. So there's such a big shift. And honestly, there's no harm for me throwing a couple of these fighters from these, more developing countries, developing in an MMA stance, throwing them into Road to UFC just to see where they're at. And, no harm there. So I understand why people think that way, but you got to think that, you got to look at some of the talent that has come out of Road UFC and how they performed in the UFC to say that the system is working. I think it's absolutely working. Did I see that guy from Kazakhstan get cheered by the crowd at Tai Laka's show? Might be the first time I've seen a Chinese crowd cheer against a Chinese fighter. Didn't expect it, even at Ely. I know. I did see that. So that you're talking about Shui Combat. Shui Combat, or eBay Shui Gado. It's a new Chinese promotion. I'm not sure where they're going to be like headquartered at going forward, if they're going to keep doing shows in Xinjiang and the Northwest. I think probably not, since Tai Laka probably won't fight again there. But yeah, so they had a show in Northwest China, far Northwest China, in a little small, like self-administered region called Ely, where a lot of these Chinese Kazakhs come from. Tai Laka was in the main event. They also had a guy named Bekmeri Marks, who is Kazakh. He was 4-0 at the time. Now he is 5-0. He fought in the co-main event against a Tibetan guy named Rugajun, and he won the fight by ground and pound, I believe, in the first round. So yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, those Chinese Kazakh fan base there, overwhelmingly ethnic Kazakhs in attendance. It makes sense to me that they would cheer for all the ethnic Kazakhs, no matter what country they're from. So, yeah, that was really cool. The fan reception seemed to be really strong at Shui Combat. So that was super cool. Tai Laka got a great reception. His whole family came in the ring. Going into the fight, I was like, this is not totally necessary for Tai Laka to take this fight. But when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, the guy's young. He may never, ever get a chance to compete in this kind of setting in front of all these people that he knows, in front of his family. If he gets signed to the UFC, he's going to be all over the world. Who knows where he's going to eventually plant to call home in terms of training, So he may never get this opportunity again, even if it's kind of a, what do you call it? A little bit of a can crushing. Kirill Karpyshyn, his opponent, a Kazakh guy, not saying he's a can, he's 1-1, So it was a squash match for sure, but it was a chance for Tai Laka to get to compete in front of his family. So I can't blame him for that. It seemed like it was a great opportunity and a good experience for him. So I'm happy for him. I think the plan is still for him to be at Happy Elephant October 12th. You're also going to have Liotza, the K1 heavyweight champion. You're going to have Huang Fei'er and Hailai Wu Samwo against foreign fighters. That's at the Galaxy Arena in Macau. The same one that the UFC will be at just 5-6 weeks later. So I'm really looking forward to that show. I really do think that it's going to happen. I feel good about this. So I think I'm hoping the UFC will really try their hardest to stack this show, because you got to think that they're going to be relying a lot on people coming in from outside of Macau for the show. So, I was talking to a friend that had spent time in Macau yesterday, and he was just like, yeah, when you go to Macau, it is such a multicultural place. You see people from Thailand, you see people from Malaysia, Philippines, all around Southeast Asia. They're all coming to Macau to gamble. So I think that it's not just going to be a Chinese card. I think you'll probably also have, wouldn't surprise me if you had Loma Lukbunmi. Wouldn't surprise me if you had Jekka on the card. Even other fighters from East Asia as well. I bet you'll see Naim Jargal to Minden Barrel on the card as well. So I think it'll be a very Pan-Asian kind of event. Will we have this podcast next week? That's the plan. I don't know where I'll be, hotel or the Apex, the PI. Who knows what will go down, but there will be a podcast next week as far as it is in my control. Unless there is, unless they're like, hey, we can give you 30 minutes with Dana or 10 minutes with Dana White at 4:00, then, I'll probably cancel the podcast, but I can guarantee that I'll have some kind of live stream at some point. Maybe I'll have more than one. We'll see what kind of opportunities arise. If I can get someone else to hop on there with me and you guys can ask them questions, that would be really fun too, I think. We all want the sport of MMA to improve as a whole. Do you feel like it's valid to call out the UFC when they put on bad cards because we know they have the fighters to do it? And then you're going on to say, if more fans like, promote, and justify what we experienced Saturday, that's going to lead to more of the same product. I do think that we have to give space. If there are other UFC fans that have no problem, I like, if you watched Saturday and you actually enjoyed it, then that's fine. I don't feel like it's my right to be like, no, you shouldn't like that. I have one relative that always says, don't yuck my yum. Don't yuck other people's yum. I don't care. Like, if you were actually excited because maybe you have your own connection to the fighters on that card, that's totally fine. But if that's really important to you, that the UFC stop putting on Apex cards, Apex level quality cards, then I think that's your responsibility as a fan to let them know. I think it's your responsibility as a fan to call them out for that. Absolutely. No, I side with you on that. I draw the line at criticizing other people that actually like it. I don't see what the value in that is. And, but no, if you don't like Apex level stuff, then call it out. Don't watch it. Signal to the UFC, give the UFC all the negative signaling so that they will consider it. Give them that negative feedback, because otherwise they're not going to change what they're doing. So, yeah, there you go. Is it good to use snarky hyperbole to make fun of fans? I don't think so. He's the perfect fighter with no flaws, and fighters shouldn't even try fighting him. And they got angry. Is it good to poke at these fans? Personally, I stay away from that. You can easily drift into bullying with that and make MMA fandom a much less fun place for everybody. So I usually stay away from that. If I'm gonna debate somebody, I try to make sure it's a positive experience for people as much as I can control, or I just stay away. Elite fighters are suffering from deteriorating mental health. Do you think that there has been an effort allocated to cultivating wellness and awareness in fighters of late? I do think that it is becoming more accepted to use sports psychologists. That's the best that I've heard. I still don't see a whole lot of fighters talking about literally just going to therapy. I think that that's still a little bit taboo. And I wish that it wasn't, because certain kinds of therapy, not all therapy, but I've really benefited from therapy. I'm going to therapy right now. Every 2 weeks, I make a 15-minute drive to see a therapist, and I don't care who makes fun of me for it. It's fantastic. I found a really good fit. So no, I'm not ashamed to admit that at all. And I wish that it was more normalized for other people to normalize it. normal to normalize it. I wish that it was just something that other fighters embraced as well. Sports psychologists, I think, do a lot of really good work as well, and it seems like that's becoming more popular. But we even if like, and this goes back to like the bullying thing of just like we really have to, as fans, we really have to consider the weight that our words can carry. I know I'm sounding a little bit like a dad here, and so I'm not going to talk to you guys like your children, but just like um, our words matter, and if we're concerned about fighter well-being, even the athletes that we don't like, we have to consider the cumulative and specific impact that you know making fun of them, deriding them, all of those things, sending negative energy their way. We have to consider how that affects people for sure. Why do I think that there are media members who get invited for the events, act like complete knobheads, and ask terrible questions? Probably because they have a good relationship with someone in PR. Um, I would say that's or not just PR, but someone within the UFC, or like they like the UFC when they grant. I don't know what all goes on, and I can't ever like speculate like this is why this person got approved. If you work for a big radio station, then that would increase your chances of getting approved. If you have a huge audience, even if you're like, if UFC is going to Toronto, they're probably going to give credentials to like the big like Toronto local radio station, the Toronto newspaper. Like they want there to be a local impact. So sometimes that is why they're granted out. I don't feel like you usually just see just like rogue lone cowboy YouTubers getting UFC media credentials unless they're somehow connected to like the Nelk Boys or something, some kind of connection like that. But usually there's not a lot of people in my position that are approved, which just makes it all the more confounding to me that they would take a chance on me. But yeah, usually there's something going on behind the scenes where they've either they're a local media, or they've just got some insanely huge audience and a good connection to someone within the UFC, probably. Like Chad Johnson or Pink Suit Guy antagonizing fighters. Do you understand the benefit of antagonizing fighters at these pressers? Probably clout chasing. I mean, think about how many times those videos were viewed. It is still hard. It's still hard for me to understand, like, the mind frame of how someone could go into a press conference thinking like, I I just am I'm just gonna stir shit up. Like I just want to like make this fighter pissed at me. I don't understand how someone thinks that way. Um, there are almost like pro wrestling. There are acts that people put on. There are certain masks that people will wear as almost like their media personality, and they want the storylines, the drama, so I think that's kind of how they see it. I i don't have that kind of personality. Now, do I talk a little bit more, um I don't know, a little bit more put together when I'm on camera? Sure. I don't want to be boring. I don't want to be sitting back in my chair and stumbling and stuttering all the time. I try to be a little bit more polished and put together when I'm on camera. I'm not the Sorry, that was weird. Like you can be so prepared for a live stream, and then just like all of a sudden I look at my phone and it's like your phone is now connected to your computer. I'm like, who told you to do? Who told you to do that? I never in a million years like it's using my phone as a mic. Like why would you think to do that? So interesting. So okay, and then we talked about that question. And then you're saying, James, that you're one of the guys going after him. Lots of the top tier guys went after the guy that Rio is talking about. I think it's justified since he's a UFC bootlicker and wants the sport to get worse. Not in his eyes, right? How many people will readily admit that they want the UFC to be worse? It's just his opinion. And again, like I don't agree with the opinion. And okay, sorry about that. We have to stand up to people who justify nonsense. I don't know that we have to, and I don't know that we have to. I don't know that we have to make them feel publicly like an ass. I think the way if I felt like he had an opinion that I had to like confront, I would simply just reply to him and just say like, hey, I disagree. I'm curious how you think that this is actually better for competition. And that's how I go about it. I think just like taking screenshots of tweets and then just like reposting them being like, hey guys, this guy's an ass. I don't know if that's the best and most like helpful way to do that. I feel like it burns bridges and it feels toxic to me, but you know how I feel. I see a lot of fans who hate on Adesanya. If they want him to lose so bad, why not go to his opponent's camp and scout for them so Adesanya can lose? You know, something productive instead of talking trash on the internet. I know. I mean, this is never going to change. You know that there's always people that support their fighter, hate on the other fighter. That's just the way things go. Probably there are guardrails set up for random people to not just like show up and act as a spy in a city kickbox. Like if you want to go train at city kickboxing, you're not going to get to spar with Adesanya. That's a very protected experience for professional level fighters. So I don't know if that would be super helpful, but I've never understood trash talking anyways. I've talked about that a lot too. What differentiates the cultures of combat sports athletes and traditional athletes? I think that in traditional athletes, there is often. So what I'm referring to is like long-standing cultures of other martial arts. It seems like there is a respect for athletes simply competing, and in MMA, there's like this "what have you done for me lately" perspective. I think that's a lot of the big difference. And then people will tie in the way that a fighter fights and carries themselves. They will tie that into like all these weird identity politics, and they'll tie it into like masculinity. Are you man enough? All these really weird things. And there's not a true respect for someone simply making the walk to the cage and competing. I feel like in a lot of other sports, there's that underlying respect for competition. But it's not universal. I feel like there is a lot of toxic fan culture in soccer or football. It seems like there's a lot of really gross places that goes, and you can find it in a lot of different sports. But baseball is a pastime. It's something that you watch as you go. Are there hardcore toxic baseball fans? There surely are. But my dad is a big baseball fan. He always tell me like, people need to see baseball as a pastime. It's something that you watch with a friend, with your dad, and you're conversing about other things. You're watching it as it goes, and it's an environment, that he's like, that's what I wish people would see. And there's a long-standing culture, there's traditions that have to be respected. And so it's this whole other thing. And they play 4 or 5 times a week. You can't just think about how did you play last night? It's not a what have you done for me lately kind of culture, where MMA fans often will give up on their favorite fighters when they just lose one fight. And I think that really separates the different sports cultures. Now, a fighter will typically only fight 2 to 3 times a year on average. So there is a little, in a way, I see seeds of a justification for what have you done for me lately, when maybe your favorite fighter hasn't fought in a year and you're excited for them to compete. They make the walk and they fall flat on their face. So I think that's probably why there's a little bit of that kind of culture when there's not 150 games in a season, so things are just a little bit different. I listened to a podcast called Cagecraft where they dissect every fight for each card. That's a lot of work. Is that one of the hardest things to do in the sport, to go over every fight? They even have a ranking system based on excitement. Hey, that's cool. I like that. I didn't know they did that. That's something I could really get behind. As arbitrary as that is, those are the kind of things that I really like, where it's like, hey, we don't have to take this super seriously. It's just a fun thing. These are just our opinions on who we feel like is the most exciting in our opinion. I love that. I'd love to see more things with that. Eventually, hopefully soon. I meant to do it this summer, but I had some things come up where it kind of got pushed to the back burner. But eventually on my page, I'm going to have rankings for different countries. So you'll be able to be like, who's the MMA ecosystem top prospects in China, outside the UFC, or Korea, Japan. Eventually, I want to have it for the little countries, or the countries that have only a little bit of representation in MMA too. I want you to be able to see, who are the top fighters coming out of Bangladesh right now? Who are the top fighters coming out of Vietnam? Those are the kind of things that I really want to have. So kind of like niche rankings like that, I think are really cool. So going over each fight, that is so freaking hard. You really have to have an analytical eye where you can watch a fight through one time and be able to take really good notes. You're not having to rewatch things over and over. So I'm guessing you have to do that. The other thing is that once you do that over and over again for a while, eventually, what I'm guessing they do, and this is something that I do, every time I provide some kind of analysis for a video that I'm doing, I save all the notes that I take on particular fighters and I catalog them. That way, the next time I'm doing a video where it's like, oh, hey, I've already covered this fighter before, I already have a lot of notes on them. So I'm guessing they have that too. If you're doing that with that much repetition, you're going to get a lot of repeat fighters. So that saves you a lot of time as well. But what is impressive about that is that, like, if you really want to get good at analysis, you've got to have repetition. And for them, they're just like, screw it. We're going to do this every week. We're going to go through the whole card. It's going to be really hard for you not to get better at analysis really quickly, as time consuming as that is. I really hope that it's worth it for them to be able to do that. Because you want to have some kind of payoff for that kind of time investment. So that's super cool. Super cool. Do I know what would be unique coverage for Road to UFC? Would self-documenting your journey there and what you do there, not sure if it's feasible. So yeah, for that, there's a couple ideas that I had for unique coverage, and you're not going to be able to do every single idea every trip because um, you have to also think through like I have to take time to to travel from the hotel to the venue. I have to take time to edit what I just did and post it. Especially if you're like me, you're a one-man army. You can't send this off to an editing team. So if I've got a video that I really want to post in a timely manner, I've got to have time blocked off to do that. So that's what I'm trying to do in thinking through that. And also, like for me, for this being my first time doing this, it's probably better to almost like undershoot the quantity of content just to get my foot in the door, just to make sure things feel good and that I've got plenty of time to do things well. So some of the ideas I have, I'm probably not going to do, but doing the vlog thing, so here's the thing. Ever since I got into MMA media, like when I first got the idea of creating a media company, I remember sitting at a coffee shop. I remember exactly which coffee shop it was. It was 1900 Barker on a Saturday morning in Lawrence, Kansas. And I remember getting the idea of starting an MMA media company, whatever. And I thought it would be so cool to also get to combine a little bit of like travel vlog elements to it. It would be really cool to get to take like really high quality portrait pictures of fighters. In my mind, I thought in their natural, in like their home where they come from. Thought that would be really cool. So many fighters don't have really good pictures of themselves. So I thought that would be a really cool thing to be able to do for fighters. And then just like being the like English speaking guy that's interviewing fighters that don't often get coverage, you know? So when I think about next week, I really want to like just build a good foundation. I want to do a couple of the things that I've always wanted to do, but never have been able to do. I was really happy that the opportunity came last week to interview Jingliang. That's a whole another thing that I didn't even get to today. But yeah, just like wanting more opportunities to interview. And sometimes that's just more of a time thing for me. But yeah, I think like when I think about my week, probably a lot of the travel vlog stuff is going to come out the week after, just because that takes time to edit, especially for me to be able to pull off the vision that I have with those. But I don't feel like I'm not really seeing them like UFC embedded, where it's like, I mean, I have no product to sell with these videos. So those are just going to be fun things. As I'm driving, I have a little mount. I'll just turn I'm going to do it all on my phone. And so I'll just, make fun things as I'm wandering around, and those can come out hopefully pretty quickly in the days after. Do I like that the UFC is giving out custom shorts for the fighters that are in good spots? I do. I love that. Customized gear makes the sport more individualized. It's positive for everybody. The UFC is able to really like make the best use out of their partnership with Venom. They're able to sell more fight kits. I don't know if those particular fighters get a bigger cut. I don't know, but it seems like I just saw today, they posted a bunch of the gear for the Riyadh season, UFC 306, O'Malley versus Divulge. I saw that they posted a lot of gear for that. I think that's great. We need more of that. We need more specialized, individualized things. So I love that. This was mentioned on Sound and Pound, but did you hear about what Craig Jones Invitational is doing against ADCC? I know it may be impossible to be what if a competitor did that with the UFC, would they get crushed? I saw the payouts for winners of ADCC is only 10K. Yeah, I mean, the question is, how long can you do that? Do you have a business model that allows you to sustainably do this. It's cool to have one event where you do that. But is it sustainable? That's the real question. Otherwise, it's great for the grapplers. So we'll see if this is an ongoing thing, but he is giving out a lot of money. I was reading from William from Open Note Grappling. In one of his articles, he mentioned that fans should support independent analysts so you can get unbiased opinions and projects. Does working for the UFC or a big company shackle you to uninteresting opinions? In a way, yes. It does mute some of the like, think about this. Think about if John Anik was just like, no, Francis Ngannou is the best heavyweight in the world. You're not going to hear that opinion from him on a UFC, on any kind of UFC content, maybe even on his own, like Anik and Florian podcast. Like, I don't know if you'll hear that. Maybe he already said that. But like, there's the whole controversy this week with like the UFC cutting out portions of Israel Adesanya clips from press conferences where he's talking about Francis Ngannou, and kind of like the UFC is trying to erase him from their history. So yeah, like there's certain things that you're not going to get to hear. That being said, I feel like it still could be worth your time to like, it doesn't mean that you can't do really good analysis for the UFC. And it still, because here's the other thing, is that people that work for the UFC get the most access. If you're a commentator, if you're Anik, if you're Bisping, if you're Laura Sanko, you've got all the access that you could ever want to UFC fighters. So in a lot of ways, they have a very close perspective to what's going on. They actually get to like spend a lot of their life around UFC and fighters. So they have a pretty good perspective in that concern. And it's also their full-time job. So I wouldn't count them out for sure. And you all know I'm a huge fan of people like Sanko and John Gooden and hope to get to meet some of those folks next week. But there's a lot of UFC employees that do incredible work, especially on the analyst side of things. So I think you can mix your bag a little bit, and don't discount someone just because who they work for. Discount them because you think their opinions are not a good quality. But I do appreciate also the sentiment towards independent analysts. But an independent analyst could still have the fighters that they really like and have a lot of bias. All of us have biases. All of us do. And it's just our job to be aware of our biases and present the most objective, to try to like see reality separate from our biases, I guess. So even independent analysts can have a lot of biases for sure. So another problem with the guy earlier, screenshotted posts are insufferable, delusional with a touch of narcissism, calling himself a genius when guys like me are trying to learn the sport and develop respectable ideas from respected people in the sport. No, it doesn't really rub me the wrong way. I just go about my way, to be honest. Whatever. I've had good interactions with that guy where we talk about totally different things, and you're never going to agree with anybody 100% on things. So if things like that rub me the wrong way, I just go along my way. What type of food will you be looking forward to when you go to Las Vegas? I'm still looking at this, and I'm getting lunch with a couple people that live there. So in that situation, I'm probably just going to be like, and I also really trust their opinion. Be like, hey, take me to a good spot. I hear there's good taco trucks in Las Vegas. I'll probably try to have some good coffee, like whatever the best coffee is. I had a friend that was in Vegas a couple weeks ago and recommended a good coffee spot to me. So anytime I travel Doesn't matter how big the city, town, whatever is. I try to find the best coffee. So I'll do that. There's a really cool bar that I've heard about that's like very like kind of like fandom oriented with like kind of like quirky, nerdy sorts of things that I really want to check out. So I'm still looking into that, but I definitely want to like you know like Las Vegas gets a lot of crap and for a lot of reasons that it should, but I'm just like there's got to be some good stuff here. I would not say that I'm like the biggest Las Vegas. I've been twice before, you know. The last time I went to Vegas, I was probably like 14 years ago. I also went with my family in high school, which it just wasn't like it's not like the most family friendly place to go. So I haven't had like the best experiences, but going on my own for several days at a time, I think I'll be there 5 days. I am really determined to be like, I'm going to have a good Las Vegas experience. I'm going to find the good things. So we'll see. Why hasn't there been more promotion of UFC 305? I'm on the internet and I'd like to admit it, but I haven't seen much buzz around Dracus versus Izzy. And it's a really compelling fight. Dude, I don't get that either. Okay, so like I was one of the people that was like, Dracus versus Izzy has to happen. There's so much heat to the fight. They're two of the best middleweights right now. It's such an interesting fight, blah, blah, blah. I really wanted the fight to happen. It feels like we went through a peak of hype for this fight, but it feels like it's so far gone. It just, I don't know what it is. If we need more press conference bits, if we need some more sparks, maybe by Saturday things will change, but it just feels like the time that fight was really, really hot has come and gone. So I don't know. It just feels like a normal pay-per-view. I don't know if that's on the fighters to not promote it. I don't know if that's on the UFC. What's going on there? But I agree. It's a great pay-per-view. I'm so excited. I think the fight is still going to deliver. But it feels like the normal amount of hype for a normal pay-per-view week, for sure. Do I think sports as a whole is political? I've seen other media members who try to say keep politics out of sports. We saw it happen at the Olympics for politicizing a non-issue. Is that hard to keep politics out of sports? It is because the people. I mean, because nationalism is a thing. They're often like sports. People are not able to just reduce sports to the competition side of things. You have nationalism playing in. I was talking to one of my contact friends the other day about this Brave show that's coming up this weekend in Pakistan, and they've got a couple India versus Pakistan fights on this card, and he was adamant that all of those fights were not going to happen because none of those fighters would be able to get to Pakistan. And we'll still see what's going to happen, but he was just like, athletes, like people in India and Pakistan hate each other, and they just generally don't like they don't get visas approved. They're not allowed in the country. He's like, I bet you anything these fights are not going to happen, which would be a huge bummer. But I'm just like, dude, what is the deal here? Like, why can't we just act like adults and not make fools of ourselves in these situations? Like, why can't we have a fun rivalry between two neighboring countries? Why do all these other weird things have to come into play? And it's just too bad. Like, yeah, nationalism and more just these weird identity politics get drug into things. People have also said that like sports is like sports diplomacy. They look back at like the Cold War, the Olympics and the Cold War, all the things, all the times that really meant something. And I really do feel like, especially at a national level, country versus country level, you can't separate national identity and pride from fandom. And there's always going to be a dark side of that is willing to, like, for lack of a better term, go to war for your country or for your team. And so I think sports has always been political. Although, I mean, you think back even to like the Olympics in the 30s when they were in Berlin, and it's not a new thing at all. Some of the conversations are new with a lot of the identity politics, but it's not new in sports. Sports is inherently political, and it feels refreshing when it's put out, when it really is separate. That feels really refreshing, and it's absolutely what I prefer. But just like, it is such an impossibility to ever separate the context around sports, because sports always happens in a context, and that is the political, geopolitical worlds and situations that we're in. So it is really hard to pull that away. Sports has always been political, and it always will be political, and it adds intrigue into the competitions. So it is what it is. The ranking system on Cagecraft podcast is each fight is ranked out of 10. Since there are 3 of them, it's averaged out for the entire show to judge the card. Cool idea. Totally. I love that idea, especially getting a couple different opinions in there. I think probably makes it a little bit less subjective, even though it is highly subjective. You talked about analysis. Do you know how analysts like Miguel Class or Ghost create analysis quickly, how they pick up patterns so fast, then make content out of it? Sometimes I see them make content with diagrams within 30 minutes of a fight. Sometimes I see them do it while the fight is still going on. How does one get to that point? Is that a talent or just years of practice? Because I asked Miguel, and he said he's been watching since UFC 75, while Ghost has only been watching since 2018. So I don't know. You orient your whole brand identity around that, and you have to create systems to be able to produce content quickly. Currently, like, so an example, I try to think through what systems can I create to have good or the best possible fight posters that I can make really quickly. When Dana White goes on Instagram, announces a fight, shoot, I want to make a post real quick. I've got systems in place to help me do that as quickly as possible, to do some of the legwork ahead of time. Here in my studio here, I've got a ring light set up. I've got the camera here. Everything is set up. All I have to do is just like turn on the camera, bring my laptop over, bring my chair over, turn things on, and we're ready to go. So the hope there is that if there's news announced that I actually want to react to, I can do that really quickly. I don't have, like, my last place, everything was stored away because there just wasn't space. So I had to get everything out. It kind of just made me not want to do it at all. But the hope going forward is that I'll be able to produce a lot more like quick reactions to things and go live, all of that. So I've created systems to help me work a lot faster. They probably have a lot of the same. A lot of those tools that they use probably just right there at the ready. What do I think about that censorship of Adesanya talking about Ngannou? Yeah, UFC talks about free speech, but that it doesn't seem like free speech. Well, the reality is that nobody is actually on board with free speech. I've never met a single person that is a free speech absolutist. It doesn't exist in our world. The UFC has a brand to maintain, and they are making decisions to protect that brand and to allow it to flourish in the way that they seem best. If there is a narrative out there that Francis Ngannou is the real best heavyweight in the world, then it greatly, how does that affect the UFC heavyweight championship? It's always just going to be for second place, right? So they want, the narrative that they want is that Francis is out there taking easy fights. He's out there fighting whoever in boxing or whatever, but in the UFC, the best fight the best. That produces the best fighter in each weight class. So that's why they would rather fans kind of move on. So it's a branding decision. They're wanting to move on from that. And so, I mean, yeah, free speech when it comes to PR and branding, like no PR person is going to be a free speech absolutist. Absolutely not. So that's why, I mean, and then my opinion whether or not to do it, I mean, just for the reason I just stated, I understand why they're doing it. And it's not like it's against the law, to do that. They're simply just protecting their brand. So I understand why they're doing it. Cut out there for a second. I personally don't. I feel like Francis Ngannou is the number one heavyweight, and I have no problem saying that. I think that Francis Ngannou will be the number one heavyweight until either he fights John Jones or whoever the UFC heavyweight champion is and would lose, or if he just kind of drops off the map, then I think that he will drops off the map in terms of like gets a bunch of losses, starts losing a bunch. Then, I think he's ahead of whoever the UFC heavyweight champion is, but not by a whole mile. So that could change depending on if he were to lose, things like that. But as long as he keeps winning, he's the best heavyweight in the world for all I'm concerned. And I have no doubt of that. It seems like a lot of people in the media feel that way too. A lot of fans will probably forget, but I mean, I have no problem saying that for sure. To build on my question, to build on your question, Slack and Connor Rebush said that if you need access to do your job, then that person doesn't have talent to begin with. Look at yourself, for example. You create interesting and have interesting thoughts despite not constantly having access to fighters. You're not like Kevin Iole, who needs to talk to Dana to do his job. Do you personally have an easy time being thoughtful about the sport without access? I'm still mixed on it. I think I still feel the same way. I see what you're saying, but the assumption there is that analysts and UFC employees got where they got and have access because they don't deserve it. I would disagree with most of that. If you look at Laura Sanko, her body of work before working with the UFC was exceptional. I always felt like even when she only worked for Invicta, I still felt like, man, like this is one of the best commentators I've ever heard. John Anik had a long time being on ESPN MMA Live and had other work in broadcasting. And so like he absolutely deserves to be there. And they've only gotten better since they've been there. Other people, like, again, like certain people, it's just like any job that you have, you're hired because your employer thinks that your experiences, what you bring to the table qualifies you to be there. So the notion that they don't deserve the access to those athletes, I would disagree with that. I mean, they're literally just doing their job. They're doing the best that they can. And their experiences are coloring what kind of content they produce. I think if I only consumed content from UFC employees, that could be a problem because then you're more likely to kind of like, then you're starting to go down the like, you're just a UFC, not an MMA fan. You're not really exposed to any kind of adversarial opinions. But I think again, if you can mix them in there, because like, even like Joe Rogan, a lot of people don't like Joe Rogan. I wouldn't say I'm like a huge Joe Rogan fan overall, but every once in a while he'll give really good opinions. And I appreciate that. I also really appreciate a lot of just the on-air presence that Joe Rogan has. He's exceptional at his job in so many ways. And contrary to what some people believe, I absolutely think that Joe Rogan deserves to be on UFC broadcasts in 2024. Even though there's a lot of things that I mean, not even talking about his personal podcast, but just like on air, I'm just like, yeah, I wish he wouldn't do that. But what you bring to the table is so strong that I think that you deserve to be there. So, no, I see where you're coming from, but I just think you have to diversify your palette a little bit. Do I think the research that some of us bring to your podcast and other shows is different than just the regular fan who just acts? I will give you guys a ton of credit. Very, very few of you are just like gut level reaction kind of fans. Usually, like so many times, even today, like y'all will bring things to my attention and you've researched it so well. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not qualified to talk about that. You have obviously researched that a lot more than I have. And that is one thing I really love. And it almost makes me wish that we could have like more of like a Zoom call where we're all able to like pop up and give little spiels on things and actually have a conversation, because I'm like, the YouTube comments do not give you guys enough room to share the things that you've been learning about. So I do really appreciate that. And perhaps it's also some of the moderators too. Some of the like lowest quality comments, I'm guessing, sometimes are kicked out. But no, I do really pride that about this channel, is that like there's not a lot of idiots on here for sure. So y'all the best. Always appreciate everything that you bring to the table. All the things that you have thought about that are important to you. I love hearing about them. Even if I disagree, you can always expect me to at least give a like kind response, even if I'm disagreeing with you. So guys, I will see you next when I'm in Vegas. So I will leave on Monday morning and make the long drive down there, and you'll see a lot from me. I'll post what I think is appropriate to post on my channel, on Instagram, a couple of things, all the stuff. It'll be on there. Some more just fun travel things I'll probably post on my personal Instagram, which is linked on the MMA Ecosystem Instagram account. Like literally you can click on my name. It's a public account, nothing to hide. It's for everybody. So I'll post, I use that account for more like travel stuff. So, and just like general photography. So you can probably find some stuff on there too. But the whole reason I'm going is to give stuff and put it back in the world. So you'll be hearing from me a lot next week. I appreciate your support. Hey, and you may notice the studio is coming together. I put up these shelves recently, a couple days ago. Got some nice plants here. Some vintage cameras. Both of these cameras belong to my dad's dad. This one, this Olympus 35 SP, is from the 70s. This camera, what is this? It's like a German one. Voigtlander. This is from the 1950s. Crazy. I would love to take some pictures with these someday. Just got to get the film switched out. But I've got the few press passes. I've been to more than this, but like I've got my one of my Invicta press passes here. I've got the first Invicta show that I went to, Invicta FC8. You see Michelle Watterson there. This was September 6, 2014. Irene Aldana and Alexa Grasso made their Invicta debuts at this show. Got my Bellator credentials there. Eventually, I've got the idea that I want to have is this is a fun space. It's a little bit basic for me though. I'm going to get some lights in here, maybe some blue lights, give it a little bit of color. I also really want to think through some fight posters, but specifically like really important Asian MMA events. So I'm going to try to get like the poster for the Zhang Wei Li, Jessica Andrade poster event that was in Shenzhen. Maybe a Pride poster, maybe a Ryzen poster, just important events. And eventually these shelves will fill up a little bit more. I'll switch things out, and it'll fill up a little bit, but love having the plants. Helps it feel a little bit more fresh. Something alive for once. So I should just use my own fight posters. I actually, back in the day when I was first a UFC fan, I'm mad at myself now because every single UFC pay-per-view, this was from like UFC 80. The first one was probably UFC 83, GSP versus Sarah 2. That was in Montreal. From that point until like probably UFC 112 or so, I would go to Buffalo Wild Wings for every event, and I would always get the poster at the end of the event that they had hanging up. I would ask for it. And my room in college, my walls were just plastered with these posters. And thinking now about which posters those were, like, oh, that was such a good time to be an MMA fan. I mean, I had a UFC 100 poster. I had posters with like Chuck Liddell, Rich Franklin, Anderson Silva, Brock Lesnar. Just like such a cool time to have UFC posters. Eventually, my style changed, and I got rid of the posters just because they were taking up a lot of space. So yes, I do go to B-dubs. Even sometimes still, I go to B-dubs. For the event this Saturday, I'm going to be going to a tavern that's within walking distance of my apartment called Marathon Tavern. It's on like the main street in Portland. I'm going with a friend, and apparently they show UFC events. So I'll probably be on my phone a little bit creating content. The prelims, I'll probably like I do like a talk to text thing now when I make recaps. So I'll be watching a fight, basically like commentating it as I'm watching it. So I'll do that for like the Song Kenan fight. And then I'll probably do some kind of recap for Li Jingliang as well. But yeah, fun event this weekend. Really looking forward to it. It should be a great event down in Perth. We'll see you guys next time on the MMA Eco live podcast, live from Las Vegas.